We spare no expense to take you to Melbourne's best places. You can come here yourself, it's free. Just catch the tram, the free tram through the city, down to Collins Street, down to Docklands, and walk here. Sit down, bring your lunch, enjoy the sun. Fortunately, I forgot my lunch. Now, I'd like to talk about the federal government's election strategy for 2022. You're kidding, Joe. 2022. Well, what I do for you is just incredible. I listen to what they have to say and then come up with an analysis. And I've noticed there's a new word has crept into the lexicon of the federal government and the ministers, and it's Middle Australia. Middle Australia. All those hard-working, pay-as-you-earn taxpayers who pay their tax, obey the law, and are up to here in debt. Middle Australia. And the federal government is now playing on the concept of Middle Australia's insecurity. In an era where traditional alliances have broken down as far as international alliances are concerned, in an era where trade has become more important for Australians, in an era where there is no manufacturing worth talking about left in Australia, in an era where people's life savings, their superannuation, is invested in the stock market, in an era where although interest rates are historically low, there's no wage growth and people are having increasing problems paying their bills, insecurity is an essential feature of everyday existence. And all you have to do is look at the statistics as far as anxiety is concerned, difficulty in interpersonal relationships, violence in interpersonal relationships, and this goes on and on. I mean, it's no wonder that we have become a target for the world's major drug companies, because we use more antidepressants than anybody else in the world per head of population. So Middle Australia is very insecure, and it's insecure for a very good reason. So they are the perfect foil for a federal government which has unleashed an unprecedented attack on significant sections of the Australian community. For example, we've spoken about this many times, the 30% of Australians who receive social security benefits to survive. Social security benefits, not welfare. Welfare is a word that is used to denigrate people who find themselves in a difficult situation, usually through no fault of their own, who need some support in order to survive in our community. The social security system was set up. It was a handshake between the haves and the have-nots. The haves would supply the basic necessities of the have-nots as long as the have-nots didn't, steal, pillage, rape, etc. So it was a social security system. It was a system where wealth was shared in order to have some type of security in society. So in an era where social security beneficiaries are under increasing attack, where the number of people on disability support pensions has actually fallen because it's very difficult to receive one irrespective of the disabilities you have, in an era where people who are unemployed have become the new criminal class, we've got a little whippet who's come to say hello to us. Can you show people a little whippet? Here it is, a little whippet. I find them quite extraordinarily skinny dogs, but that's a whippet. Okay. Now we actually hired the whippet to come into this presentation just for your edification and pleasure. Clickbait, okay? It's clickbait, okay? I'm sorry. So, getting back to that, so insecurity is important for all Australians, not just people on social security benefits, not just people with part-time employment, not just students, but a majority of the population who is not part of the investment class, about 92% of Australians, have a very insecure existence. So what the government wants to do is drive a wedge between Australians, drive a wedge between Australians and First Nations people, drive a wedge between Australians and refugees, drive a wedge between Australians and people on social security benefits, drive a wedge between Australians and trade unionists. I mean, in an era when being a member of trade union is almost a criminal offence, where legislation is on the table which will basically outlaw trade unions, in an era where national security, in inverted commas, is paramount, in an era of espionage, in an era of the removal of basic human rights, I think it's important to remember that this is not an accident. The government understands it won the last election because of insecurity. It understands it has nothing to offer the Australian people as a people. It has nothing to offer them as far as public education is concerned, public infrastructure, public health. It doesn't have the money because we don't actually have the taxation system, as we discussed before, in order to have the money to look after people's needs. So it needs to divide Australians. And they believe that middle Australia, hard-working, people who pay the taxes, obey the law, cast their ballots, are their natural allies. And as long as you maintain security, as long as you've got people you can point at, First Nations people, refugees, people on New Start allowance, disability support, pensioners, bludgers, you name it, you've got somebody to point the bone at. Middle Australia will side with it, but they've got a problem. We're on the edge of a recession. We are in uncharted waters as far as international trade is concerned. And Australia doesn't survive because of local manufacturing. It survives because of exports, whether it's tourism, tourists coming here, whether it's agriculture, products being distributed, or more importantly, whether it's natural resources. That is what it survives on. And the difference between having a secure job, being able to pay your mortgage, the difference between that and poverty is 6 weeks' wages. Because before you can get a New Start allowance, which is a pittance, you have to exhaust all your savings. And it doesn't take much when you've got a $500,000 mortgage or $1 million mortgage or a $250,000 mortgage to run into financial difficulties if you can't work. And with increasing insecurity, as far as the economy is concerned, the spectre of unemployment, mass unemployment, is becoming an issue. And the government has forecasts in terms of the economic situation. So it needs to create these divisions within Australia. The thing about middle Australia, it's like every other middle class in the world. When they are squeezed, they react. And they react violently. And they react in a manner as we see in Hong Kong. And they react as we saw in Argentina a few decades ago, and as we saw in Sudan recently. When the middle classes believe that the government of the day is using divisions in Australia to promote its agenda, when the middle class understands that their future does not lie with the government which creates divisions in society, that their future does not lie with being an investor, their future doesn't lie with franking credits, then we have a situation where we have major challenges. When the middle class feels betrayed, they realise they've been used, they realise that these artificial divisions which have been created in society affect their children and their grandchildren and their children's and grandchildren's future. You will find that people will unite and revolt against the current government. Not just a few piddly protests, but mass protests in the range as we see in Singapore, as we saw in Sudan, as we have seen in Argentina in the past, and other countries around the world. It was the destruction of the middle class in the Depression during the 1920s and 30s which led to many of the radical changes which occurred in society, both from a left-wing and a right-wing perspective. So, if the government thinks that middle Australia is going to support it, irrespective of what happens. They need to understand the middle class will only support them during a period when their economic interests are met and they are actually able to resource their debts. The middle classes will only support the government of the day, the Morrison-led unfunded Compassion Brigade, the Happy Clappers Brigade, while they're in work and while they can pay their bills. As soon as they're having problems paying their bills, they will turn on the government, not just in terms of electoral politics, but in terms of direct action. Now, you may think this is something that I'm just making up, but who would have believed that 100 days ago the people of Hong Kong would have risen up against the authoritarian regime they're under? It's the same here. There is a lot of dissatisfaction bubbling under the surface as the economic pressures increase. This beautiful tranquility we've got here at Docklands, this wonderful water, these beautiful buildings, the ship behind us, which is just coming behind us, is all an illusion. And that's the Middle Australia is an illusion. Very few people in Middle Australia are secure. If the government thinks that leaving it to market forces is going to ensure Middle Australia will continue to vote for them, continue to support them, will continue to demand laws to outlaw unions, continue to demand that people on social security benefits are ostracised and dehumanised, will continue not to address the First Nations people's concern, will continue not to address the refugee issue, well then they've got something coming. And most importantly of all, Middle Australia is exceptionally concerned about climate change and the climate emergency we now face. Because if there's one thing which galvanises Middle Australia, it's the future of their children and their grandchildren. So, Mr. Morrison and the rest of your cabinet hacks, these policies you're introducing today may make nice headlines and talking points on talkback radio and television, but in reality, you have now started to